d4. One of the merits of beginning a game with d4 is that the pawn standing in the center is protected. It is safe from attack, whereas in openings starting with d4, the e-pawn is more vulnerable. In queen's pawn openings, with the queen firmly backing up the center pawn, white dictates the tempo. He has the initiative and keeps it for a long time against any defense, any line of play that black may select. Right from the start, white is given the opportunity to build up his position, with little danger of being bothered by a counterattack, while black struggles to achieve equality. If black plays timidly, if he fails to dispute the center by c5 at some stage, his queenside pieces, especially the c8 bishop, will be badly cramped and unable to develop decent activity. If he develops carelessly, moving the same piece several times in the opening or bringing his bishops out before the knights, punishment will come swiftly. The purpose of chess being to win, not to entertain the gallery with pretty pictures on the chessboard, it is no wonder that many players prefer the dull, safe queen's gambit to the romantic but risky adventures of the kingside gambits. I venture to say, and this opinion has 40 years of research behind it, that the queen's pawn openings have contributed as many masterpieces and as many genuine brilliancies as did any of the kingside openings. d5. This is the best way for black to stabilize the pressure in the center. Each side now has a pawn firmly stationed in the middle of the board, occupying one square and attacking two others. Each side has released two pieces for action. c4. The object of this move is to destroy black's pawn center. First, white offers a pawn to induce black to surrender the center. If that does not work, white threatens to dissolve it by 3. C takes d5. Queen takes d5. 4. Knight c3. Queen a5. 5. e4. And white controls most of the center. D takes c4. Black's idea with this capture is to avoid the constricted positions that are normally his lot in the queen's gambit declined, but in doing so he has given up a beautifully centralized pawn for a less central one. Accepting the gambit is perfectly sound, but the resulting play requires great care on black's part. Above all, he must not hold on to the extra pawn for too long. e3. A good move, but more to the point is 3. Knight f3. To prevent the counter-thrust. 3. e5. White plays to release his light square bishop and recover the pawn at once. Bishop f5. By this, black hopes to solve the problem of the shut-in c8 bishop, one of the evils the defense is heir to. However, the solution is not quite so simple. The bishop's absence from the queenside weakens that section of the board and leaves the b-pawn vulnerable. Another drawback in black's move is that it violates one of the precepts for sound development. Bring out your knights before the bishops. Instead of the text move, black's best bet is in counterattack, viz. 3. e5. 4. Bishop takes c4. Or 4. D takes e5. Queen takes d1 check. 5. King takes d1. Bishop e6. 4. E takes d4. 5. E takes d4. Bishop b4 check. Attempting to hold on to the extra pawn might lead black into one of the traps prepared for the greedy. 3. b5. 4. a4. c6. 5. a takes b5. c takes b5. 6. Queen f3. And white wins a piece. Bishop takes c4. The recovery of the pawn equalizes the material, but white's position is slightly superior. e6. A pawn move that contributes to the development of a piece, in this case the f8 bishop, is always in order. Developing one of the knights first is somewhat risky. For instance, 4. Knight f6. 5. Queen b3. Threatens to win a pawn by 6. Queen takes b7. Or 6. Bishop takes f7 check. Or if 4. Knight c6. 5. Queen b3. Knight a5. Then 6. Bishop takes f7 check. King d7. 7. Queen d5 check. King c8. 8. Queen takes f5 check. King b8. 9. Queen takes a5. And white wins 2 pieces. Even at this early stage white is directing events. Queen b3. Why does white move his queen instead of getting his knights out? His purpose is to punish black for faulty development. Black's play has not been normal procedure, and the way to take advantage of his sins is not with routine moves. White's move, developing a piece with a threat, queen takes b7, keeps black on the run. It does not give him time to consolidate his position. Bishop e4. This looks attractive, since black protects his b-pawn, and at the same time threatens to play bishop takes g2, winning a rook. Black's move, however, is abnormal and a serious infraction of the opening principle which states: move each piece only once in the opening, place it at once on the square where it exerts most power and where it has the greatest freedom of movement. f3. This move is justified on more than one count. Not only does it parry a threat in an economical way, but it also forces black to lose a move in the retreat of his bishop. Incidentally, the pawn at f3 will firmly support a later advance of the e3 pawn. Bishop c6. Now we see the results of the bishop's ill-timed expedition. It stands at c6, depriving the b8 knight of its natural square of development in the opening. Worse yet, it obstructs the c-pawn. If this pawn cannot get to c5 to dispute control of the center and to open the c-file for black's pieces, there is a danger that black will be smothered. Knight e2. But the knight belongs on f3, you must be protesting. So it does, but if it cannot develop at f3, get it into the game somehow. Move it, if only to get it off the back rank. Of course, the same comment applies to the other 3 knights, too. White is ready to castle and get the h1 rook working. Knight f6. At last, a normal, reasonable developing move to which no exception can be taken. In nearly every variation of every opening, the king's knight does its job most effectively at f6, or f3, for white. e4. This move has a threefold purpose. 1. To control the center, by occupying it with pawns. 2. To clear a path for the development of his c1 bishop. 3. To limit further the activities of black's c6 bishop. Bishop e7. The only square open to the bishop. If instead 8. Bishop d6. The reply 9. e5. Wins a piece for white. The back rank is cleared and black is ready to castle, if white lets him. Knight b c3. Bringing another piece into play with gain of tempo. The threat is 10. d5. E takes d5. 11. E takes d5. Bishop d7. 12. Queen takes b7. And white wins a piece. Queen c8. Black must guard the b-pawn and put aside any thought of castling for a while. d5. In order to drive the bishop back to the second rank. E takes d5. This exchange of pawns is inferior to simply retreating the bishop. The opening up of lines favors the side that is better developed, and in this case white will benefit. E takes d5. This recapture opens the e-file for the use of white's major pieces and compels black's bishop on c6 to retreat. Bishop d7. Anything else loses material. Before making his next move, white must decide whether to continue bringing pieces into play or to try exploiting his present lead in development. Thus, he pauses to take stock before committing himself to a definite course of action. He has a pawn stationed at d5, which at first glance is doing an excellent job. It prevents black's b8 knight from developing at c6, keeps the d7 bishop from coming to e6, and restrains the f6 knight. The pawn does this single-handed, but at a price. In standing at d5, it occupies a square that should be reserved for pieces. Pieces have more mobility than pawns and can attack more readily. Pieces can utilize d5 as a jumping-off square, a point of departure to any part of the board. In fact, the wretched pawn does a disservice in obstructing the diagonal of the bishop and the supporting queen and takes up room on a file which should be open. Better that the d5 square be vacant than that a pawn block traffic there. And in this last sentence, as we shall see, is the key to white's problem. What about black's prospects? With the exception of the f6 knight, his pieces are confined to the first two ranks. His position is a bit crowded, but if he gets a chance to castle and reorganize his forces, it will be hard to subdue him. White must not allow him time to do this. White must not dawdle. d6. This energetic thrust opens the diagonal leading to black's tender spot, the f7 pawn, clears the d-file for later exploitation by a rook, and vacates the strategically important d5 square for the use of a piece. Meanwhile, the attack on black's bishop leaves him no time to breathe. Bishop takes d6. Better than c takes d6, hemming the bishop in. Bishop takes f7 check. This will smoke the king out. Once the king moves and loses the privilege of castling, he stands on insecure ground to the end of his days, which may not be far off. King d8. Black prefers this to king f8, imprisoning the h8 rook. Bishop g5. This pin paralyses black's most useful piece. Meanwhile, and this sums up the miserable state of his game, black's mighty queen is smothered by his own pieces. Knight c6. Black's idea is to develop a piece and give the queen and a8 rook freedom to move, if only to the next square. It is hard to suggest a better move, as every move is inadequate in a losing position. Black might have ventured on a more active defense, such as 14 bishop e8, followed by 15 rook f8, 15 queen d7, or 15 queen f5. He must try to beat back white's attacking pieces or get rid of them by exchanges. The formula in such cases is: in a cramped position, try to relieve the pressure by forcing exchanges of pieces. Knight e4. White puts more strain on the pinned knight. The threat, and there always is a threat when a pinned piece is attacked more than once, is 16. Knight takes f6. G takes f6. 17. Bishop takes f6 check. And white wins a rook. Bishop e7. Protecting the knight once again, and at the same time unpinning it. This is a better defense than bishop e5, which helps guard the knight but does nothing to relieve the pin. In such situations, the extra defender itself may be on shaky ground and apt to be disturbed. For instance, after 15. Bishop e5. 16. f4. Bishop d4. 17. Knight takes d4. Removing one of the knight's protectors. 17. Knight takes d4. 18. Queen c3. Black is embarrassed for a plausible continuation. Bishop takes f6. White does well to remove this rock of defense. G takes f6. Black takes with the pawn, as he wants to keep both his bishops. With his king so well sheltered by pieces, it looks difficult to penetrate Black's barricades. Castle queenside. Much more energetic than castling on the other side. White's king is somewhat exposed, but as compensation his a1 rook has an instant and powerful grip on the open d-file, putting particular pressure on the unfortunate bishop, which now is pinned. The maneuver of castling on the queenside gains a tempo for the attack, while White's king is in little danger, since Black's development is so backward. White threatens bishop e6 or queen e6, either of which adds pressure to the pin. Knight e5. Not only to help the bishop but also to play 18. Knight takes f7, removing one of his tormentors. Knight f4. Threatening sudden death by 19. Knight e6 checkmate. Queen b8. An unhappy situation for Black's queen, but the king needs a flight square. What else was there? If 18. Bishop f8. To free the e7 square for the king, then 19. Queen e6. Threatening. 20. Queen e8 checkmate. 19. Bishop e7. 20. Queen takes e5. F takes e5. 21. Knight e6 checkmate. Mates neatly. Queen e6. With the queen's entrance into the enemy camp, the attack gains momentum. White plans a win by 20. Knight takes f6. Striking once more at the hapless bishop and threatening. 21. Rook takes d7 check. And quick mate. 20. Bishop takes f6. 21. Queen takes f6 check. King c8. 22. Queen takes h8 check. And mate next move. Rook f8. Hoping to scare off the bishop, when his f-pawn would be protected by the rook. The alternative. 19. Queen c8. Runs into 20. Queen takes e5. And the previous win. Knight takes f6. Isn't it remarkable how threats are summoned up as if by magic against a piece that is pinned? Bishop d6. Interfering with the rook's action on the open file and thereby threatening to take the queen. Other defenses promise no favorable results. 1. 20. Rook takes f7. 21. Rook takes d7 check. And mate in 2. 2. 20. Bishop takes f6. 21. Queen takes f6 check. King c8. 22. Queen takes e5. Rook takes f7. 23. Queen h8 check. 3. 20. Queen c8. 21. Queen takes e5. Rook takes f7. 22. Knight e6 checkmate. With the text, Black unpins his d7 bishop, guards the e5 knight, attacks the queen and threatens the f7 bishop. Knight takes d7. This one hurts a bit. The knight captures one piece and attacks 3 others. Knight takes d7. Black recaptures and disposes of a troublesome piece. Rook h, e1. The doubling of heavy pieces on the open e-file, with the consequent threat of 23. Queen e8 check. Rook takes, e8. 24. Rook takes, e8 checkmate. Is enough to break anyone's spirit. The c-pawn cannot move to give the king room because of the reply rook takes d6. And if 22. Knight c5. Then 23. Queen e7 check. King c8. 24. Queen takes f8 check. Bishop takes f8. 25. Rook e8 checkmate. Is the finishing touch.